by-the-book officer thought she was just doing her job, but a prisoner's desperate final wish would force her to defy her superiors, uncover a deadly conspiracy, and risk everything for a truth she couldn't ignore. Officer Maya Washington moved through the Austin Police Department with a quiet, unshakable confidence that both intrigued and intimidated her colleagues. She was a portrait of discipline. Her dark, intricate braids were always pinned into a flawless bun at the nape of her neck, not a single strand out of place. Her uniform was perpetually crisp, the creases sharp enough to cut glass, and her calm, measured way of speaking commanded attention without ever raising its volume. It wasn't just her immaculate appearance that set her apart. It was an aura of untouchable professionalism. Maya was smart, hardworking, and treated everyone, from the department director to the janitor, with the same level of detached, formal respect. She followed the rules. She never cut corners. And most importantly, she never, ever mixed her personal life with her work. This didn't stop the attention. It was constant, a low hum of interest she learned to navigate with polite precision. Almost every week, someone tried their luck. Officer Miller from the traffic division made it a point to bring her a coffee every morning, always with a hopeful, lingering smile. Detective Russo from robbery just happened to park his beat-up sedan next to her pristine one almost every evening, asking if she needed an escort to her car. There was even a senior sergeant who once left an expensive gift basket on her desk, filled with gourmet chocolates and a small bottle of champagne, accompanied by a note that simply read, "Dinner." Maya's response was always the same. A small, polite smile. A quiet "thank you, but I can't." And a firm, unwavering gaze that left no room for negotiation. Her gentle but absolute refusals only seemed to deepen the mystery around her, making her more of a challenge in some men's eyes. For Maya, however, her personal rule was a shield. Work was work. Period. Some men laughed it off. Others grew visibly frustrated, but no one took the rejection harder than her boss, Director Evans. Director Evans was a man who wasn't accustomed to hearing the word no. In his late 50s, he wore his power like a tailored suit. With his perfectly coiffed silver hair, a gaudy gold watch that flashed whenever he gestured, and a corner office with a panoramic view of the city, he radiated an authority that made people afraid to cross him. From the moment Maya had joined the department, Evans's gaze lingered on her more than any other officer. She noticed. Everyone noticed. But she chose to ignore it, keeping her head down and her reports perfect. That strategy worked, until the day he called her into his office. The heavy oak door clicked shut behind her, sealing them in. "Maya," he began, leaning back in his plush leather chair, a predator assessing his prey. "You've been doing exceptional work here. You're sharp, disciplined. You have a real future in this department." Maya kept her hands clasped neatly in front of her. "Thank you, sir." He smiled, tapping a gold-plated pen on his polished desk. "You know, I could help you accelerate that future. There are promotions on the horizon. Better pay, better hours. You deserve a fast track." Maya remained silent, a cold knot tightening in her stomach. She knew exactly where this was heading. His smile shifted, becoming more intimate, more predatory. "Maya, I like you. More than just as an officer. I want us to be closer. You and I, we can make things much better for each other." The air in the room grew thick. "Sir," she said, her voice dangerously steady. "With all due respect, I'm here to do my job. Nothing more." Evans's expression hardened, the friendly mask dissolving. "Are you saying no to me?" "Yes, sir," she replied, her gaze unflinching. "You are my superior, and you are old enough to be my father." The atmosphere crackled. Evans leaned forward, his voice dropping to a low, menacing growl. "You do understand there are consequences for the choices we make, don't you, officer?" Maya's eyes narrowed. "Sir, I haven't done anything wrong." "Wrong? No, but you're making things complicated for yourself," he hissed. "I could make your life here very difficult. In fact, I could send you somewhere you'd wish you had thought twice. Somewhere toxic." A wave of cold dread washed over her, but she refused to let it show. "Sir, please. I worked hard. I respected everyone. There's no need for this." Evans sat back, a cruel smirk playing on his lips as he tapped the desk with a single finger. "Then maybe you should think about respecting me." He waved a dismissive hand toward the door. "You could go now." Maya took a slow, deliberate breath, gave a curt nod, and walked out. She didn't have to wait long. The following week, the call came from HR. No meeting, no discussion, just a cold, impersonal notification. She was being transferred, effective immediately. Her new assignment, Red Rock Penitentiary, a maximum security facility hours away from Austin, far from her home, her life, and everything she knew. The official reason was staffing adjustments. But Maya knew the truth. It was punishment. It was exile. She didn't complain. She wouldn't give Evans the satisfaction. She packed her bags, her face an unreadable mask, and left. The first thing Maya noticed about Red Rock Penitentiary was the air. It was heavy, stale, and cold, thick with the scent of disinfectant, sweat, and something less tangible, despair. It felt as though the very walls had absorbed the weight of the thousands of broken lives they contained. The main gate shut behind her with a deafening metallic clang that vibrated through the floor of her car and settled deep in her chest. This was a different world. The facility was bigger, louder, and infinitely more tense than her polished station in Austin. The constant cacophony of echoing shouts, buzzing fluorescent lights, and the distant slamming of steel doors created a nerve-wracking soundtrack to her new reality. The inmates were different too. Every day, she saw men whose eyes burned with a raw, untamed anger. Others looked utterly broken, their shoulders slumped, their gazes hollowed out, as if the years had siphoned the very life from them. A few, the most dangerous ones, kept their heads down, moving with a quiet lethality that was more unnerving than any overt aggression. Maya adjusted quickly, her training kicking in like a second skin. She fortified herself behind a wall of cold professionalism, her expression even more stern than before. She followed the protocols to the letter, kept her distance, and avoided all unnecessary conversation. She was a ghost in uniform, observing everything, revealing nothing. And that's when she first noticed him. Elias Eli Vance. Eli wasn't like the others. In a place defined by chaos and aggression, he was an island of calm. He was tall with broad shoulders that spoke of a strength he seemed to hold in reserve. His hair was kept neatly trimmed, his uniform clean. But it was his eyes that truly set him apart. They were calm, intelligent, and held a profound depth that didn't belong in the brutal landscape of Red Rock. Most prisoners wore their history on their faces, years of regret, rage, or simmering violence. Eli's expression was different. It was watchful, patient, as if he were waiting for something the rest of the world had forgotten. Maya told herself not to notice. He was just another number, another inmate. But she couldn't help but feel the weight of his gaze following her. From her very first week, Eli's eyes found her whenever she was on the floor. He would watch her from across the crowded cafeteria as she patrolled the perimeter. He would track her movements from a corner of the exercise yard, his head slightly tilted in quiet observation. It wasn't the crude, predatory way some prisoners looked at female officers. It was something else, something she couldn't quite decipher. A look of intense, analytical curiosity. She brushed it off. She was there to work. Days bled into weeks, and Maya's routine became a grimly familiar rhythm. Morning roll call, cell block inspections, escorting inmates to and from the mess hall, the yard, the workshops. Through it all, she was aware of Eli. He never spoke to her, never approached her, never gave her a reason to officially engage with him. But the silent communication of his gaze continued, a steady, unnerving presence in her periphery. It was almost as if he were studying her, waiting for the right moment. One sweltering afternoon, she was assigned to escort a group of prisoners to the on-site textile workshop. It was a simple, mundane task. Line them up, check the cuffs, and lead them down the long, echoing corridor. She was halfway through the line, her senses on high alert when she passed Eli. As she stepped by, her hand brushing past his, she felt something slip into her palm. It was a movement so quick, so smooth, so impossibly subtle that it was invisible to anyone else. A small, tightly folded piece of paper. Her eyes flicked toward him, her heart giving a single, hard jolt. Eli didn't look at her directly, but his voice was a low whisper, meant only for her ears. "Read it when you're alone." Her professional mask remained perfectly in place, but behind it, her mind was spinning. Her fingers tightened around the note. When the prisoners were secured in the workshop, she slipped the clandestine message deep into her pocket, the paper burning against her skin. Later, in the stark, empty quiet of the staff break room, she unfolded it. The handwriting was small and neat, the words stark against the cheap paper. "Clinic. Midnight." She stared at the words, her breath catching in her throat. She knew from the daily logs that Eli had checked into the prison clinic that morning, claiming to be sick. Inmates faked illness all the time, for attention, for a break from the routine, for a chance to smuggle contraband. Her training, her instincts, her every rule screamed at her to throw the note away, to report it, to forget it ever happened. It wasn't professional. It wasn't smart. It was a trap. But as the clock on the wall ticked relentlessly toward midnight, she couldn't stop thinking about it. About his eyes. About the impossible calm he projected. About the silent question that seemed to hang in the air every time he looked at her. The prison was unervingly silent at midnight, a sleeping beast. But Maya's heart was a frantic drum against her ribs. She had spent the last several hours arguing with herself, pacing the small confines of the on-call room. "Don't go. It's a career-ending mistake. He's an inmate." Her rational mind, the part of her that had guided every decision of her life, was screaming at her. But another part, a quieter, more insistent voice, urged her forward. As the hour approached, her feet seemed to develop a will of their own, carrying her down the dimly lit corridor toward the clinic. The hallway was cast in long, eerie shadows, with only a few overhead lights buzzing faintly. Her footsteps echoed on the polished concrete, sounding impossibly loud in the dead quiet. Each step felt like a betrayal of her principles, a step further into a dangerous, unknown territory. When she reached the clinic door, she paused, her hand hovering over the handle. "This is wrong." The thought was a final, desperate warning, but her hand still found the cold metal. The door opened with a soft, almost apologetic creak. Eli was sitting on the edge of a sterile examination bed, leaning forward as if he had been waiting for hours. The moment he saw her, his eyes, which had been fixed on the floor, lit up with a mixture of relief and apprehension. "You came," he said, his voice a quiet rumble that filled the small room. Maya closed the door behind her, the soft click sealing her decision. She crossed her arms over her chest, a defensive posture meant to remind both of them that she was still in uniform, still in control. "This isn't professional, Vance. You shouldn't have called me here." Eli stood up slowly, taking a single step closer but maintaining a respectful distance. He seemed to understand the invisible line between them. "I know," he said, his gaze earnest. "But if I didn't, I might regret it for the rest of my life." Maya's chest tightened, but she kept her tone clipped and official. "Whatever this is, it can't happen. You're a prisoner. I'm an officer." Eli's eyes held hers, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of raw vulnerability in them. "That's the problem. You see a prisoner. I see the only person in this entire place who still treats people like they matter." Her breath hitched for a fraction of a second. "You shouldn't say things like that." He offered a faint, sad smile. "I don't have much to lose by saying what I feel. But you still have a life on the outside. You don't take risks unless they're worth it." Maya looked away, her eyes scanning the sterile room, pretending to inspect the cabinets of medical supplies. "Why am I here, Eli?" she asked, her voice softer than she intended. His voice softened in turn. "Because I need you to know the truth. I don't belong in here, and I have one last wish before I die in this place. I need you to hear my story." She hesitated for a long moment, the silence stretching between them. Finally, she gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Eli took a deep breath, as if gathering the strength to revisit a painful past. "Before this, I was a production supervisor at Omnicorp Foods. I'd been there for 8 years. I was in charge of quality control. Every batch, Every shipment, my signature had to be on it. I was proud of that job. We made clean, safe food for families all over Texas. Maya listened, her expression unreadable, but her focus absolute. Eli's face darkened with the memory. Then one day, upper management called me into a private meeting. They said costs were too high, that competition was eating into our profits. They'd found a way to cut costs, new preservatives, cheaper ingredients sourced from overseas. But the chemicals they wanted to use, they weren't approved for human consumption. Some of them were outright toxic in high concentrations. Maya frowned, and they wanted you to approve it. He nodded, a bitter look in his eyes. Exactly. They said it was just bending the rules a little, that no one would get hurt. But I'd seen the preliminary lab reports. It wasn't bending the rules, it was shattering them. I refused to sign off. They didn't like that, Maya stated, less a question than a conclusion. They offered me money to keep quiet. A big promotion. Even a share of the increased profits, Eli said, his voice laced with disgust. When I refused all of it, things got tense. I told them I was going to resign, and I made it clear I was planning to go to the media. I had proof, test results, internal emails, everything. Maya leaned in slightly. What happened? Eli let out a short, humorless laugh. They got to me first. One morning, the police showed up at my house. They said I'd been embezzling company funds and falsifying financial reports. They'd planted evidence on my work computer and even forged my signature on fraudulent documents. Everything I had gathered against them was gone, replaced with a perfectly crafted frame-up. Maya's stomach twisted. So they framed you. 15 years without parole, he said, his voice heavy with the weight of that sentence. That was my reward for trying to do the right thing. She was silent for a long moment, processing the story. It was detailed, specific, and delivered with a conviction that felt chillingly real. It didn't sound like the typical inmate's lie. Eli looked at her, his eyes pleading but steady. I'm not asking you to believe me instantly. I just have one last wish. Investigate. Look into Omnicorp. Look into my case. If I'm lying, you'll see it. But if I'm telling the truth, you'll understand why I can't stop fighting, even from in here. Maya hesitated, the full weight of his request crashing down on her. Eli, this could cost me everything. My career, my future. He took another step closer, his voice dropping to an intimate whisper. I'm not asking you to risk your career for me. I'm asking you to follow the truth. It's what you do every day. For a long, breathless moment, neither of them spoke. The buzzing of the overhead light seemed to amplify the silence. Finally, Maya let out a slow, shaky exhale. I'll see what I can do. A faint, grateful smile touched Eli's lips, and the tension in his shoulders seemed to melt away. Thank you, Maya, he whispered. That's all I could ask for. She turned to leave, her heart heavier than when she had walked in. She had just crossed a line from which there was no return. And as she stepped back into the darkened corridor, she knew, with a terrifying certainty, that this was only the beginning. The next day, Maya began her quiet, unsanctioned investigation. She moved with the caution of a bomb disposal expert, knowing that a single misstep could detonate her entire life. She started by looking into Omnicorp foods. On the surface, everything was pristine. Official reports, press releases, and financial statements painted a picture of a model corporate citizen. But Maya knew how to read between the lines, how to spot the subtle inconsistencies that hinted at a darker truth. The company's public records were too perfect, too clean. She knew she couldn't use official police channels. Director Evans would be watching, waiting for her to make a mistake. So she reached out to the one person she could trust implicitly, her younger cousin, Jamal. He was a brilliant anti-establishment computer science student from Houston, a digital prodigy who saw firewalls and encryption as thrilling puzzles rather than obstacles. She drove to see him on her day off, laying out the story in the privacy of his cluttered apartment, which smelled of old pizza and soldering fumes. Jamal listened intently, his eyes gleaming with interest. So, a corporate conspiracy, a framed innocent man, and a secret investigation? Maya, this is way better than any of my video games. It's not a game, Jamal. It's dangerous, she warned. The best games always are, he replied with a grin, already cracking his knuckles over his keyboard. Their initial searches confirmed Maya's suspicions. OmniCorp's digital footprint was heavily sanitized. Any negative press, any customer complaints, any mentions of safety violations on public forums seemed to have been professionally scrubbed from the internet. This in itself was a red flag. It wasn't the absence of evidence, but the evidence of absence. Someone with a lot of money and power was working hard to maintain a flawless image. As Jamal dug deeper into the dark corners of the web, Maya focused on the physical world. She spent hours in public libraries, poring over old microfiche records of local newspapers from the time of Eli's trial. She found a few small articles about his case, all of them parroting the official narrative of a greedy supervisor caught with his hand in the cookie jar. There was no mention of a cover-up, no hint of a deeper story. The first sign of trouble came a week later. After a long shift, Maya walked out to the staff parking lot to find her car with a single, perfectly slashed tire. It wasn't a random act of vandalism. It was a message. Clean, quiet, and deeply unsettling. There was no note, no witness. Just the hissing of air escaping rubber in the desolate parking lot. A cold knot of fear tightened in her gut. They were watching her. The realization sent a chill down her spine that had nothing to do with the evening air. The threat was no longer abstract. It was real, and it was close. Shaken but resolute, she called Jamal that night. "They know," she said, her voice low. "Someone knows I'm looking." "That just means we're getting closer," Jamal replied, his voice buzzing with a mixture of concern and excitement. "And I think I found something." He had been running complex search algorithms on archived, defunct web forums. On a long-forgotten employee grievance site from 6 years ago, he found it, a single, anonymous post. The author, claiming to be a former OmniCorp lab technician, described being forced to falsify safety reports on new cost-saving additives. The details of the post, including the specific chemical compounds mentioned, matched Eli's story perfectly. The post ended with a chilling line, "I quit before I had to live with blood on my hands." They silence everyone who speaks up. The post had been deleted within hours of being published, but Jamal had found it in a cached archive. It was the crack in the wall they had been looking for. At the bottom of the post was a cryptic username, KimGuy88. "It's not much," Jamal said, "but it's a start. If we can find this Kim Guy, we can blow this whole thing wide open." The hunt for a ghost had begun. The username KimGuy88 became Maya's obsession. For weeks, she and Jamal worked tirelessly to attach a real name to the digital ghost. They cross-referenced old employee manifests they managed to access through a data breach archive, looking for lab technicians who had left OmniCorp around the time the post was made. After chasing down a dozen dead ends, they found a potential match, a man named Arthur Finch, who had abruptly resigned 6 years ago for personal reasons. His age matched the 88 in the username, likely his birth year. His last known address was in a quiet suburb of San Antonio. Finding him was one thing, getting him to talk was another. Maya drove to San Antonio on her next day off. She found Arthur Finch living in a small, run-down house with drawn curtains, a man clearly trying to stay invisible. When she knocked on his door and identified herself, not as an officer, but as someone investigating a miscarriage of justice, he tried to slam it in her face. "I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, his eyes wide with fear. "Leave me alone. I know about the additives." "Arthur," Maya said calmly, holding her ground. "I know they forced you to falsify reports. An innocent man has been in prison for 6 years because of it. His name is Elias Vance." The mention of Eli's name made Arthur flinch. Maya pressed her advantage, her voice softening. "You posted about it once. You wanted to tell the truth then, and I think you still do. You don't have to live in fear forever." She spent the next hour talking to him through the closed door, appealing not to his courage, but to his conscience. Finally, after a long, heavy silence, the door unlatched. Arthur Finch, a man who looked 10 years older than his age, his face etched with worry, let her in. With trembling hands, he led her to a safe hidden behind a loose floorboard and pulled out a flash drive. It was his insurance policy, a complete copy of the original, unaltered safety test results, and a chain of internal emails, signed by top-level executives, explicitly ordering the cover-up. "They ruined my life," he whispered, handing her the drive. "Don't let them ruin yours." With concrete, undeniable proof in her possession, Maya knew she couldn't go through official police channels. The corruption might run deeper than just Omnicorp. She submitted the evidence anonymously to the state prosecutor's office, sending it through a secure, untraceable email set up by Jamal. The effect was immediate and explosive. A state-level investigation was launched, and the story hit the news like a hurricane. Faced with irrefutable evidence, the carefully constructed wall of lies around Omnicorp crumbled. The court moved quickly to review Eli's case. Within a month, his conviction was overturned. He was a free man. Maya was there the day he walked out of Red Rock Penitentiary. She stood by her car in the visitor parking lot, watching from a distance, her uniform a stark contrast to the civilian clothes he now wore. He stepped out into the bright Texas sunlight, blinking as if waking from a long nightmare. His face held the same calm expression she remembered, but his eyes, when they finally found hers across the parking lot, were different. They were soft, filled with a profound, unspoken gratitude. He walked toward her, stopping a respectful few feet away. "Thank you," he said, the two words carrying the weight of 6 stolen years. Maya allowed herself a small, genuine smile, keeping her expression professional but warm. "You deserve your life back, Eli." He smiled faintly, a real smile this time, one that reached his eyes. "You gave it to me." For 2 days, a quiet sense of relief settled over Maya. It was over. Justice had been served. The guilty were being investigated, and an innocent man was free. She had done the right thing, and the world felt, for a brief moment, like it had been set right again. Then, the news broke. Maya was at home, off duty, when she saw the report on a local news channel. Her stomach plummeted. The headline scrolled across the bottom of the screen. "Newly exonerated man, Elias Vance, reported missing, feared kidnapped." She turned up the volume, her heart hammering against her ribs, but the details were scarce. He had been taken from outside his temporary apartment by unknown men in a black van. There were no witnesses, no suspects. He had simply vanished. Her phone began to buzz incessantly with messages from her colleagues at Red Rock, all asking if she'd heard, none of them having any real answers. A cold, sickening wave of guilt and fear washed over her. This was her fault. She had freed him from one prison only to deliver him into the hands of a far more dangerous enemy. She had poked the hornet's nest, and now Eli was paying the price. She paced her small living room, her mind racing, a storm of panic and self-recrimination clouding her thoughts. She hadn't just uncovered a case of corporate fraud. She had exposed a ruthless, powerful entity that would stop at nothing to protect its secrets. She had to do something. She grabbed her car keys, her first instinct to drive to the Austin PD, to tell them everything she knew, to force them to act. She stormed out of her apartment and headed for her car parked on the street. As she reached for the door handle, she saw it. A small, white envelope tucked under the driver's side windshield wiper. It wasn't there when she got home. Her hands trembled slightly as she pulled it free. There was no name, no address, just a single, folded piece of paper inside. She unfolded it. The message was printed in cold, impersonal block letters, a stark contrast to the neat handwriting of Eli's first note. "If you want to see Eli again, come to Houston. Alone. Call this number when you arrive." Beneath the text was a burner phone number. Houston. Alone. No backup. No police. It was a clear, terrifying ultimatum. Her pulse quickened, the paper crinkling in her tightening fist. She sat down hard on the curb beside her car, the note still in her hand, her thoughts spinning. This wasn't over. It wasn't even close. Dear viewers, Maya thought freeing Eli would be the end of their story, but it was only the beginning. Part 2 will take their bond to a place neither of them expected. And trust me, you'll want to see what happens next between them. If you're ready for Part 2, type "Bring Eli Back" in the comments below. We read every single one, and please, Always comment with respect. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter of this incredible story.